Okay, welcome to this recording about the urinary system. So let's have a look what we're going to cover. On this first recording, we'll have a look of the just general function and talk about kidney and especially focus on the nephron. We'll see both anatomy and physiology of the nephron and really briefly we'll touch upon on some of the hormonal regulation involved there. And that's where we're going to wrap up this recording. And then we're going to, in the subsequent recordings, go through rest of the objectives that I've listed out there. So as we embark to study the urinary system, you may ask that why we need to know about this system in the body. And one way to answer to this question is to return back to the formula that we are familiar with from the past. So you've seen this formula for the cellular respiration earlier on. We saw that at the cell level, we are converting sugars, so glucose molecule in this example, and oxygen into ATP that then drove the cellular processes. And as a byproduct, we created carbon dioxide and water as well. And it is this CO2 and water that we want to focus on this context. And interestingly enough, we can convert CO2 and water into carbonic acid, which you will see in the lower equation in the middle. In fact, this equation is called carbonic acid equation. This carbonic acid can then be converted into bicarbonate and hydrogen. And remember, it is the bicarbonate that we transport most of the CO2 as in blood. So now the question that we face becomes, how do we get rid of the excess hydrogen from the body? And the answer is that this is where the urinary system becomes especially important for us. So here we have the main parts of the urinary system listed. We will spend most of our time looking at the kidneys, including studying them on a microscopic level. Then in the subsequent videos, like I mentioned, we will also touch upon the structures involved in transportation, storage, and elimination of the urine. So let's make a start with the kidneys at this time. So functions of the kidneys are numerous, and these include, as some of the examples that are most relevant to us, removing waste products like nitrogen waste, toxins, drugs, and excess ions, and those are removed in the urine. As well, kidneys serve many regulatory functions. Here we see some familiar hormones like renin, which is responsible for the maintenance of blood pressure. And we also see erythropoietin that stimulated the red blood cell production, for example, in response to low oxygen levels. And these are produced by kidneys. Also, converting vitamin D to its active form would be something that we might want to consider here. So kidneys are situated against the dorsal body wall in the retroperitoneal position, so behind the peritoneum. So really what I'm trying to say with that is think far back on the body. And this is, for example, why impact sports can cause injuries to our kidneys. If we want to think of another way to locate kidneys in the body, they're located at the level of from the 12th thoracic vertebrae to the 3rd lumbar vertebrae. Or if you prefer to relate them to the ribs, it would be between ribs 11 and 12. It is also noteworthy to kind of pay attention at this point that the right kidney is slightly lower than the left kidney. And you might wonder why. And the reasoning is because of the position of the liver. So liver takes place on the right upper abdominal quadrant. So everything else gets pushed down a little. So in terms of the size of the kidney, an adult kidney is about 5 inches long and 2.5 inches wide. And the models that we typically have in the classroom are very true to the size. A part that I wanted you to notice, especially from this slide, is the renal hilum. So this is the indentation on the medial side, where many structures either enter or exit the kidney. So, for example, we can see the ureter that carries the urine from the kidney to the urinary bladder. We could also see renal artery and renal vein, and we would see many different nerves there as well. On this slide, we also see the adrenal gland, which is familiar to you from our endocrine system review, and as it sits on top of each of these kidneys. And just like we saw with the cerebral hemispheres of the brain, kidneys can be divided into two regions, the outer cortex and the inner medulla. And within medulla, we can see two main structures. First of all, we see renal or medullary pyramids. These are those triangular regions, often darker tissue than the rest of the kidney's internal tissue. And we also see renal columns. These are paler tissue extending from the cortex to the medulla in between the pyramids. I also wanted to highlight the renal pelvis. This is the region on the medial aspect of the kidney. This is like a funnel where the urine builds up before being taken away by the ureters to the urinary bladder. And leading to this area from the renal pyramids, we see these collecting drains, which are known as our calyxes. They collect urine from here so it can be then passed to the ureter. About 25% of the total blood volume of the body passes through the kidneys each minute. And here I have listed the pattern of the flow through the vasculature of the kidney. So let's review that quickly. So renal artery provides each kidney with arterial blood from the abdominal aorta. And this renal artery divides into segmental arteries, which then divide into interlobar arteries. Then they separate into arcuate arteries, which lead to the cortical radiate arteries. For the venous flow, cortical radiate veins lead into arcuate veins, which then again lead into the interlobar veins, and those then end up to the renal vein. Notice here that there are no segmental veins. And finally, we do see that that renal vein returns blood to the inferior vena cava. Okay, now I want us to zoom into a kidney, and we're going to be looking at the microscopic structures known as nephrons. There are over 1 million nephrons in each kidney, and they serve as both structural and functional units of these structures. You next is just a very schematic diagram of a nephron. In reality, there's a lot more variability, and it could be positioned in any way at all. So all kinds of mirror images of what you're saying are possible, but I think it's useful to start with a simplified representation. So here we see the schematic representation of a nephron. Let's look at its different parts and what goes on in different areas. We bring blood into the nephron by afferent arteriole. Remember afferent as arriving. And the blood leaves from the nephron via efferent arteriole. Remember efferent as for exiting. In between those, you will see glomerulus, which is essentially a capillary tuft, where the blood passing through it is getting filtered. And anything that is small enough to pass through the openings of this filtering membrane moves from the blood into the glomerular capsule. There is a high pressure here, which is responsible for forcing fluid and solutes out of the blood into the next structure, so our glomerular capsule. This is the first part of the nephron proper, surrounding the glomerulus from all sides, except where arterioles enter and exit. So really this picture that you're seeing on this representation is kind of a cross-section of this area. And this is the process where the blood gets filtered and some of the smaller elements from it move to the nephron. This process is known as filtration. This is a non-selective, passive process. Here, water and solutes that are smaller than proteins are forced through these glomerular capillary walls. Instead, proteins and blood cells are typically too large to pass through this filtration membrane. Now, once the material has ended into the glomerular capsule, the fluid is called filtrate. As long as the systemic blood pressure is normal, filtrate will be formed. If arterial blood pressure is too low, filtrate formation stops as a result of the glomerular pressure being too low to form the filtrate. And then we have our proximal convoluted tubule. This is this thicker tube coming out of the glomerular capsule right next to it. And this continues as thinner tube that is much more longer than I could fit into this picture. It is known as a nephron loop, or some older textbooks will call it also as loop of Henle. And at this level is where we will see reabsorption happening. Here, materials from the nephron return back to the vasculature that is running right next to it. We reabsorb what we do not want in what will become as urine and put it back to the blood circulation. Reabsorption process ensures that useful substances like water, glucose, amino acids, and ions are taken back to the body. While some reabsorption is passive, most of it is active, so we're spending ATP to drive this to take place. And you will also have a distal convoluted tubule. This is like this proximal one, but located after the nephron loop. And it is at this level where we will see our next movement of materials. This time it's back from the blood vasculature to the nephron. And this is known as secretion. This is essentially reabsorption in reverse. Some materials such as hydrogen and potassium ions and creatine move from the blood into the nephron here, so they can be eliminated in the filtrate. Secretion is important for getting rid of substances that are not already in the filtrate, and for removing drugs and excess ions, and for maintaining the acid-base balance of the blood. Now, materials left in the renal tubule move further, eventually towards the ureter. And finally, what we see is that multiple distal convoluted tubules from multiple nephrons open to the collecting duct. And what goes into these is known as excretion. So essentially, this is our urine. And there you have it, the most important parts of a nephron and the movements of the fluids in it. The reason why we have this movement of fluids back and forth in and out of the nephron is that it really is over-engineered to facilitate any issues. And this way we end up with the urine that contains exactly what we want it to contain, but nothing that we do not want it to contain. And before we wrap up this video, I wanted to mention GFR. In clinical practice, you may face needing to look up a value for the patient's GFR. This is commonly included, for example, in lab reports. And GFR tells us how much blood passes through a patient's glomeruli in a span of 1 minute. In this way, it essentially tells us how well kidneys are working. What I'll show you next is an extension of this thinking. So before we wrap up this portion, I also wanted to return back to one hormone that we have seen in the past. Remember our ADH. Its function was that what it says in the tin, so to speak, to make you urinate less. Let's look at how this works. Under the impact of ADH, the distal convoluted tubule of a nephron, which normally has impermeable walls, it now becomes highly permeable. As a result, lots of filtrate from the nephron returns back to the blood vessel, and consequently, we produce less urine as an end result. So now you know. I think that this is a great place for us to wrap up this video, and I look forward to seeing you in subsequent videos where we'll review rest of the important aspects of the urinary system. Until then, thank you and bye.